Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I mean, accountancy is you need an accountant because they don't get distracted by the fluffy stuff, and they've got nice processes in place, and it works, and they measure the right things, and that's, that's another thing I always try and persuade my clients to buy into. Outsource that bit too, because although you could do it, like I could do my tax return, but if I did it, it would mean that every single year I paid a penalty because I'll have done it late, or I thought, oh, that won't take me long.
But that's the thing, as you say, and particularly with marketing as an area, though, isn't it? It is the fluffy stuff, and these days, people, providers, platforms are really pushing it, aren't they? Like, you can achieve this, you can do this, you can do that. And I think anybody starting a business now, they'll be hit, they'll be marketed to massively to say, yes, there's an exciting thing here. It's easy to do. We talked about it with Hugo Pickering a while ago about automated marketing, and with Dave Hayward the other day as well, with the idea that yes, it's quite easy. You can press a button. And then your AI, programmatic, campaign will go off and run away and just give us a bit of money. And then, here you go. It's all marvelous. So increasingly, I can see that's going to happen more and more and more, isn't it? There's going to be these nicely sort of packaged, it's great the technology is moving on, but I mean, then you do lose the skills. It's the left and right hand brain marketer again. You lose the skills of understanding how you can manipulate this to actually work effectively through your marketing plan, rather than just, okay, great, I can pay some money to this platform and then it happens for me. It's more pay money to an expert who can help you work out what you need to do. And they've spent the opportunity cost you're losing in terms of all the time they've spent keeping up to date on what that platform's doing, how it can perform. That's so important, isn't it?
Well, as someone who loves numbers, one of the numbers I'd love to know is if you're a software company, how much you're earning out of customers that subscribe to your software but don't use it. Or if you're Google, for example, I won't name a product to be unfair, but you'd see a product and everybody thinks, oh, I can do a really cheap video by doing that. So they subscribe to it and never use it. So I'd love to know that number. And I'd love to know a number from Google about how many people try Google ad campaigns and chuck 100 quid here and 100 quid there without any idea what it's doing, doesn't get them any business at all. I bet that is thousands of millions.
I agree. A pay-per-click is a really, really dangerous thing for people to get sucked into, because what they don't understand is that suppose your business is handbags, and you make one of your keywords handbags. Oh gosh, lots of people are going to click on that who are actually looking for a Prada handbag or nothing to do with Cotswolds handbags, and you pay for all of those clicks that don't lead to any sales. It's really dangerous. Well done Google, because I'm sure they get paid for it, but it's really dangerous.
Exactly, and as you say, so that's where the agency or the marketing expert, the PPC, the search agency, really come in and say, right, so straight away, what's your USP? Let's go back to the marketing plan. Let's understand what you're trying to sell here. Let's refine. Let's define what you're doing. And exactly, but they almost seem on reflection like relatively simple questions, but you can see, can't you, if you're the entrepreneur and you're going, oh, right, okay, yeah. So I've heard
big numbers.
A great case study, 100 quid might get me 10 handbags sold. Brilliant, I'll do that, because that'll get me going for first quarter, or maybe they're very expensive handbags. Gets you going, and you think, well, this is the way to do it. But you've not had somebody asking those questions and reflecting back and then helping you get the biggest bang for your buck, haven't you, really? And the appropriateness.
Paid for advertising is a classic one for me that relates back to strategy and plan, because if you just want to go out there and spend money on mass market trying to attract anybody and like you say, use handbag as your key phrase, it's going to be inexpensive. But if you know the customer you're trying to attract, the language that that customer uses, and the right channel to pull them towards you. If it is Google, then you can go and spend Google appropriately, because they call a handbag, I don't know, a clutch bag or something like that. It's very much more relevant to the audience you're trying to attract. Plus in terms of the audience, if we talk about handbags, someone who's a premium customer, you've got a premium product, might call a handbag something different to somebody who's wants a handbag at 5 quid, for example.
That's exactly right. And you also have to remember that this is actually your brand you're endangering. So that if you get it wrong and your brand then starts appearing in the wrong kind of places, that's going to damage your brand. And that's a kind of long-term risk that you've got to be aware of as well. It's not, yes, you might not get any sales out of it, but equally, you might have tarnished your brand because it suddenly started appearing on, I don't know, Woolworths doesn't exist anymore, but you might be a Prada handbag that suddenly only got Woolworths people looking at it, who then think they're too expensive, and they start talking to all their friends saying they're really lovely, but they're massively overpriced. And then you've got brand damage.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys have seen it as well in terms of business owners, entrepreneurs, they sort of set their business up with a vision of what they want for their business. They go out and market it without actually much focus on that vision, and actually then start to attract the wrong customers. They start to attract the customers they didn't want. They start to position their product or their service in a different way, and therefore they think, oh crikey, I haven't got the business I visualized. I don't like my business anymore. So I think, you know, your branding, it has to be defined right at the start of your journey. You know, again, it won't be 100% accurate, and I don't think it's ever 100% refined, but you've got to start with some sort of brand vision.
Well, it will change. The more customers you have, the more it will change. It's just inevitable that, you know, when Coca-Cola started, it had cocaine in it. And it wasn't actually, that color wasn't red. It wasn't red at the very beginning. If you look at Coca-Cola logos at the very beginning, they're kind of ornate and very bizarre and not red. And their brands change massively. It's a really good example of how brand changes.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that point. I mean, going back right to the beginning again, as you say, Mike, about you know, defining a brand and understanding what the brand is. And I suppose sometimes people might have a very clear vision about what their ambition for it. So that, you know, these are going to be the best handbags, and we always come back to handbags, but these are going to be the best handbags you can buy, you know, in Western Europe. This is going to be absolute top notch, you know, and then you find out actually producing that is totally cost efficient, and you know, you lose customers. There's not a big enough market of customers for you to get to actually to sell these things, and you go, okay, well, is that really the vision? I mean, it's sort of having enough of an understanding of your brand, isn't it, to begin with, and then but then again, I'm sort of hearing it's the idea of you've got a plan in place, as a malleable vision almost. So there's a vision, there's a plan, there's a zest to the center of it, but there's a clear definition of what you want to do and achieve, but you have to learn. Would you say, is it like learning on a obviously continual basis, but in particular, if there was a graph, you almost got the learning curve is kind of like the learning's up here, and you continue learning, but it sort of goes down a bit as you establish yourself, almost in a sort of inverse way?
I think a brand is an evolution in terms of, you know, you have that starting point. You've got to have that starting point in terms of, you know, some of the simple things, you know, in terms of, you know, obviously your name, because your name's quite important in terms of reflection on brand, how people would reference it, whether you've got some sort of consistent design, look and feel. You know, you might have some sort of symbol like your logo that references. That's this sort of like the touch points where most people think that's what their brand relates to, but you've got to have that as a starting point. I think then the rest evolves as you start to have the conversations, and again comes back to your market research we talked about earlier, and do your market research with those customers that you are trying to pull towards you, because you know you'll evolve that brand messaging because you'll get a better understanding of how your prospects or your ideal customers would see what you think is your vision or your brand.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think you have to listen to your customers really well. I read a really interesting article the other day that said that one of the most important things to do with your market research would be say to people, if you saw this brand on, and give to various things, a shovel, a handbag, a computer, how would that make you feel about that thing? Because they ought to have some kind of feeling for your brand that would make you think it was a reliable shovel or an expensive shovel or a shovel that was absolutely only for women, you know, that kind of thing. And it's really important to see what your brand means to your customers, and then market, either change it if it's wrong or market to that audience.
I totally agree. And I think at startup, for me, the key thing to really hook into is this piece I talked about earlier about the value proposition. Hence why I use the business model canvas, because it's a central part of the canvas. If your brand at start point has your customer totally in mind, and therefore you're considering the value to your customer as much as the benefits that they can have, and then you're shaping your business in terms of how I can take that value to them and pull them towards me with interest, that starts that shaping of the brand.
It also makes it easier to price it, because if you can see what your value is, then you can say, this is something they can't, this is a unique value I'm giving to them, so I can price it quite high. Or if it's something they could get anywhere, but I'm just a nicer person to do it with, you possibly need to pitch your price more comparatively with your audience, and it's got all sorts of things that come away from it.
Yeah, and pricing could be a whole different podcast, I'm sure, but you know, it's
the most painful thing you can possibly do.
Yeah, and again, nobody's ever going to get it right, you know, and it's again back to the testing and measuring piece, I think, in terms of where you think. But again, it's so important how it reflects on your brand. If you want to be a premium product, pricing at a £5, for example, you know, again, you just got to misunderstand the way your brand and your positioning is.
And it's not all about the cost of the product. I mean, I'm sure, I've no idea how much it costs to build a Maserati, but you can bet your life that they charge more than the actual cost of the bits.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I've got a quick two-parter question here, actually. Just sorry if it's two-parter, but going on from that is about, because it just makes me think. If you ask somebody, think of an entrepreneur for me, or think of an entrepreneur, not perhaps like a Richard Branson or something like that, but some on a consumer product you see, and I'm sort of thinking of like, so Ben and Jerry's or something like that originally, or what's the smoothies? Got the name of them, isn't that awful? Innocent smoothies, and something else I saw the other day. I used to subscribe to this sort of craft beer thing, a monthly subscription thing, and every time you get a beer you got the story on the back of the two people who got together one night after a drink and decided we can make a better beer than this, and it's all that sort of stuff. Obviously, it becomes the brand heritage, doesn't it? But I suppose, particularly for a number of people who are small scale entrepreneurs starting off, small business owners, and they're thinking, well, I'm the single artisan who's here crafting the handbags, say, and I had a reason because I really enjoyed making handbags. I used to be a financial controller in a large corporate, and then I suddenly decided it's my habit, my hobby, and I did this, and so clearly a lot of the brand is themselves, isn't it, as well? So it's not just the product; it's them, it's their passion, it's their why, isn't it? If we go back to Simon Sinek side of things, it's why you do it. I do it because I love making handbags and I love seeing people enjoy using them at events and looking gorgeous. That's your sort of brand, isn't it? You've got to kind of encompass that into your marketing. But I mean, obviously a lot of people do that these days. And I think perhaps there's almost, like we were saying earlier on, like a template. Some people might feel there's a bit of a template around this whole personal journey and passion. And if I tell my story, it should get traction, and people will quite quickly get onto that, perhaps, if I found the right audience. But do you find, I don't know, that either that sort of manifests itself, but also my second part of this was about sort of timing, about how long it takes to be successful, in quotation marks. How long do they actually, if you've done your journey, you've followed the formula, and you feel that by, after a year, you should be, getting by and making enough money. Do you find there's that kind of combination out there, that feeling? Or
the second one's a tough one. I don't think there is in this area a timeline. I think after a 12-month run at it, you get a good feel. If we think about the failure rates of small businesses, not trying to talk negatively, but you got the 1 year anniversary, the 3 year anniversary, and the 5 year anniversary, and you look at the statistics, very, very few get beyond that 5, so the dropout. So you should be getting a good favour. I personally say to businesses that you have to define success yourself. If you try and define success because you're looking at somebody else's business, or because you've read it in someone's book or whatever, then that's the first place I think you're going to go wrong, because you're going to say, actually, I need to have £1 million business within a year. And I love the social media quote I saw the other day. He said, did you see the other day that guy that he started a business, and he went to market, got customers really quickly, and after about 6 months he did a turnover of £1 million. And then there's the space void, and it says, neither did I. Because it's not realistic, is it? So a lot of businesses have a longer burn. I don't think there's a time frame I can necessarily say, but I think you get a good feel after that year that the things that you've put in place, you start to see some leverage. It's about knowing what's successful to you, and then bringing back those success drivers. Okay, what drives your success by definition? So if I've got one client, for example, she only wants to work 3 days a week because she wants to look after her disabled son the other 2 days of the week, rather than sending him off to a school. That's success for her. What does success look like? That's enough for her. That's what she'd measure as success for her business going forward. Others, it might be £1 million and driving the Maserati and all that sort of stuff. So it's difficult from that side. I think the first question as well is that I think that for me leads into I guess some branding and some positioning, and a conversation I have. I love storytelling, by the way. You reference storytelling. I think it's so important to be storytelling. We've just passed storytelling week, haven't we? And I was encouraged to share my story, which actually was quite powerful in itself, doing that. But I think one of the positioning pieces I see where businesses sometimes get wrong, and you've referred to like the artisan and them, is the I or the we. Is that, and again, this is going back to your research with the customer. If I've got a market that see me as an individual, then I should be selling myself as the we. sorry, I should be selling myself as the I. Yeah. Whereas if someone sees my business as a corporate, like an organization, like an accountancy firm, for example, should we be more talking about the we rather than the I? And I think sometimes people have a business to sell, which is the I, and they don't want anything more than the I, but they feel that they've got to position themselves bigger and then talk about the we. So
that's very, and those 2 points are interconnected, I think, aren't they? Because your first answer there, it reminded me of when I was lucky enough to work with my last in-house job, should we say, I had a mentor, and I went to him and just sort of outlaid what I was looking to do. And actually, funnily enough, Sally as well, who we were working together at the time, was a fantastic mentor to me. And this was another mentor and a coach. And I said about all my idea, my business plan, what I wanted to do, why I thought there was a market, and did all that detail. And then he just said, right, well, just one thing to think of, the most important question I have for you is, are you looking to do this to build a business and sort of grow an empire? Or are you doing this because you want to do something you're interested in, you want to get by well enough and provide for your family, because you had a family and everything? And I said, well, it's the latter. I'm not looking to grow a massive business and become the we. I wanted to be the I. And that's how I've defined my business, really, or try to, at least. There are collaborations and things like that, which we do. But he said, you've got to get that clear right away, because otherwise after 6 months, you're going to be disappointed if you get it wrong, because you're going to be going off on one fork in the road and you should have been on the other one. And that I hadn't even really occurred to me that much before he said that. But it seems to define so much, as you say, so important.
Yeah, I do think some startups feel that they've got to position themselves here, the big established business already, and that's why people are going to buy from me. I personally don't buy into the phrase that I have to be a limited company, because people will buy from limited companies. They buy from you. If your business is you that they're buying, that's what they're going to buy, and so sell that.
That's exactly right. And I think we're kind of beginning to get to a close here, but I think it's I think a lot of people are very frightened of being an entrepreneur. Do you think people think, oh no, that's too much for me, I'd never be able to do that, that's just too awful?
That's a good question. I think there is a fear. I think there's a fear in terms of, particularly if you're in an employed role, you've got a regular wage, you've got other commitments in the family. It is a risk to be taken. And quite often a startup business has a force of nature behind that, whether it's maybe a redundancy or some sort of circumstance, or actually disliking the job that they're in, and therefore it sort of forces their hand to set that business up. It's quite interesting when you look at the statistics right now in terms of why people are starting their businesses, and you could relate it to redundancies. But I think we're seeing in the press, aren't we, a lot of activity and a lot of startups. I think we've had record numbers for startups in January.
Oxfordshire.
In Oxfordshire alone. And I think I follow an organisation called Enterprise Nation, and they do quite a lot of work with the startups and supporting those, and they're reporting the similar numbers. And I think it's thinking about, okay, it may be because people have been made redundant, but is it because some businesses have failed and they've pivoted, and therefore they might be phoenixing? Is it because some businesses have having to pivot, but they're protecting their existing business, so they're setting up a second business? But is there actually a lot of people actually saying, actually, because of the pandemic, I've sort of stood back, I've had the interruption or the intervention that I didn't want, but it's happened, and I've had that reflection point to say, actually, I don't want to do that commute into London anymore, or I don't want to do the rat race, as I call it, and actually I'm going to take some control of my destiny. And that does take a risk, but it's driven by a passion. And I think an entrepreneur, when they can see something, they have a vision, and there's something they're passionate about, that starts to get the balance with the risk right. And I think if you're an entrepreneur and you can see that vision and the passion, and you can make risk calculated decisions, then that's when people will feel more comfortable with a startup or taking that leap of faith.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And they'll be prepared possibly to, because their passion's so important to them, to actually do some of the marketing right by letting someone else do it. And some people are so passionate about their business that you're briefed by someone who's really passionate, you can get it, you do get it. All of a sudden you think, oh, this is what I'm selling. This is what I'm doing for you.
Yeah. My marketing company that I used to have was in Oxfordshire. There used to be a lot of consultants that used to go around and like to write the marketing plans, but didn't want to be held any responsibility to that marketing plan whatsoever. And we used to have an organization that just was basically execution and delivery. And we could pick up work quite easily because that was the bit that people were fearful of doing, or they tried what was in the plan and therefore hadn't had any success with it. So
yeah. So I mean, I think the other side of that is that people kind of think that they can, that if it doesn't work, it means they're a failure. And actually that's not true. It's really not true. It may not work brilliantly to begin with, but cool, never mind, off we go, let's try something different. And you have to have that kind of try again thing. I mean, you just have to burn your cake several times before you make the perfect scone.
I've not met a business owner yet that's not had a bumpy ride, in terms of.
I know, and you'd rather hope they would actually, because then you get thicker skin.
Yeah, and as we were saying earlier, you learn perhaps more from that. But it's all about learning from your outcomes. Everything's an outcome.
Yeah,
exactly. I've got a final two-parter again. I'm sorry, I'm being really sadistic today with my two-parters. I feel like I'm at one of those government press briefings, But it's relatively straightforward, I think. Though. But one was about which I noted down here in my notes about the human side or human cost of this. We've said about you being the person investing time, money in doing the work you're doing. But one thing I think perhaps people get is the fear of burnout. Perhaps if they do then become an entrepreneur and they're working all the hours God sends, you hear about people, absolutely, they thought it was going to be great fun, but then they work out there's an awful lot of work to do. And so what's the kind of, particularly this time, how people can try and any tips you have on sort of work-life balance for the entrepreneur in particular. And then the final bit would be what's one thing that someone absolutely shouldn't do when they're starting out, and what's one thing they absolutely should do as they're starting out the first couple of months. I'm nicking a bit of that from Sally, by the way, who came up with the idea about what they shouldn't do, and I thought I'd expand on it. So I'm giving credit.
This is a
to Sally,
not an I.
It is a we, not an I. Absolutely. Sorry, Mike.
That's good. Well, I'll take the second part of your now three-part question. And if it's a government briefing, I'd probably say next slide, please. But anyway, but I'll take the second point of what you shouldn't do. And I think shouldn't do probably relates to burnout and work-life balance, because the thing you shouldn't do is everything. Yeah. Don't try to do everything. It will end up an expensive decision, in my opinion, because there'll be some wastage in there. And quite often, as I said earlier, that hidden cost, we can cover, when we look at our accounts, we can count the amount of pounds, shillings and pence we've spent, but what we don't often count is the time we've wasted in doing certain things. So I'd suggest, first of all, that you sort of like gain that understanding of your market, choose the right channels and tactics to pull those ideal customers towards you. And then I think very few small businesses are actually mass market products. So I think it's then, and I think then too many think that their market can be for everyone. So I think the shouldn't do is thinking about everything. You can do everything, and thinking about you can do it for everyone. I think from a burnout perspective, I think it's, I'm a huge planner. If you looked at my diary, you look about how I work with my clients, it's about trying to be as disciplined as we can on the valuable time that we have. And part of that valuable time is our personal time. And I think, again, through the pandemic, people have realized that more than ever. Probably starting to see now that it's actually starting to stretch because people are working from home into that. But, again, what's important to you? Why are we running our businesses? Why, as entrepreneurs, have we started a business? As you said earlier, to provide for the family, tick in a box, to have more time at home to look after my family, to have time for hobbies, to keep fit or whatever that may be. Again, what people found through the pandemic, and hence why I think there's been that sort of change. So having it real clear and being, I plan now. So for example, I through the pandemic have been really focusing on my health and fitness. So you'll now see slots in my diary where I'm focusing on doing things for my health and fitness. Whereas before I didn't have them in my diary, and it was very easy for things to get other things that I class to be as important or more important to overtake them. So I think for me, the work-life balance is about planning, knowing what's important. I call things high payoff activities, those things that you have to do in your business for the development of your business without distraction. And if you're distracted or interrupted from doing those things, quite often that's where you start to get burnout, because you're trying to do everything. You're trying to spin all the plates. You're probably not doing anything as effectively as you could do. I think the should do is all around clarity. So I've referred to this earlier, but the should do, I think my message would be, have clarity about your business. What is it you are taking to market? Who are you trying to take it to market for? And what are the most appropriate channels to link those to, in terms of taking that value to those ideal customers? And then, when you've then got your customer into your funnel, do you have clarity about your sales funnel in terms of, have you got 6 steps? Do you know where people are dropping out on those 6 steps? So you're really clear on those steps for your sales process. And then when they become a customer, how do you not only deliver the promise that you said, so how do you deliver that as effectively and efficiently with your systems and processes, but also from a marketing perspective, how do you maintain your customer relationship at every step of your customer journey, so that, again, they move from that awareness, consideration, purchase stage through to the advocacy and loyalty stage, so they buy more from you, they refer you more often, and then come that full loop again in terms of the customer. Yeah. So that would be my should do, again, clarity.
That's really clear. Good, excellent. I hope everyone was taking notes.
I certainly have been. Thank you. I appreciate taking on the 3-parter, the hybrid 3-parter question there, Mike. It was great. But I think it hopefully nicely as well sort of loops everything back round to to where we began. But I mean, gosh, as you said, but pricing, all sorts of things. We could talk all day. We'll have to have you on again at some stage if you'd be happy to, because it'd be great to go into explore some of these other topics in more depth. But we really appreciate your time today. I found it absolutely fascinating, and I'm keen that people should know, where to find you, and where are your watering holes? Where are you, and who you're looking to connect with and have conversations with, Mike? What's your sort of spectrum of activity at the moment?
Where do I hang out? Well, as you kindly referred to in the introduction, I do run networking groups in Oxfordshire. It's the Oxford Business Community Network is the body that we run that. We have a great community. That's where I hang out. I love my networking. Anybody who knows me knows that I love my networking and engaging and collaborating. Other ways you'll find me, again, I do love my social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook a little bit. And then my website, entrepreneursmentor.co.uk. If somebody is looking to develop their business, there's some real good tools on there too, some free resources and a report that they can download as well.
That's excellent. Fantastic. That's really brilliant. Thank you so much, Mike. And I'm also going to take a look at some of the traction book you mentioned as well. I'm interested in that now, and all those other areas. I went on your website, I think it was a few months ago, and I found it really helpful with those free resources you had. It's a really good place to have a delve. So, and thank you once again for your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed it.
No, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sally, for having me. Much appreciated. Love the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And bye to everyone. See you again soon.
Bye, everyone. Okay, that's all stopped.